Hello and welcome to another exhilarating episode of Biology of Cells and Tissues. Today we are going over the connective tissues, chapters 5 and 6. So we're going to go over the different types of connective tissues, the cells of them, the structure of the different types, as well as relating the structure to the function. And finally, why we have particular connective tissues in the specific sites that we find them. Okay, so connective tissue, first of all, is the most abundant and widely distributed of primary tissues. It is everywhere, okay? Connective tissue is literally just all of this stuff that's going to be in between everything else, keeping everything together. It binds, it supports, it protects, it insulates. It stores fuel, as well as it transports stuff. Blood is considered as well a connective tissue. We'll get into that in a little bit. So there's three kind of categories or classes. There is connective tissue proper, kind of put proper in air quotes. These are like our actual, what you would think of being connective tissues, okay? Those proper connective tissues are like, think about like the collagen, think about those, the bone, think about like this, all the those kind of stuff, these kind of big ones, you know, that when you think of connective tissue, that's what comes to mind. We also have embryonic connective tissues. Embryonic connective tissues, this is just like it says, it's within the embryo. There's two main ones that we're going to look at there. And then we also have specialized connective tissues. So we have the structural support. They play a role in defense, in protection, as an exchange medium. So they exchange stuff, exchange nutrients, exchange waste, that kind of stuff, as well as energy storage. I go into a little bit more detail down in here about each of those. Again, take some time, go down there and read through each of those if you have my notes. And again, notes are all available in the link in the description if you need anything, as well as if you can right now, slap a like on the video. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I get emails with all the questions, so I try and answer them as quickly as I can. So here is a little bit of our connective tissue kind of graph, or table, I should say. All of our connective tissue has a specific origin, which is known as the mesenchyme. We'll get a little bit into the embryology a little bit later on in the slides, but understand that that word mesenchyme, or mesenchymal cells, mesenchymal stem cells, any of those kind of words, is just referring to the embryonic stage or embryonic origin of all of our different types of connective tissue, okay? So from this one type of cell, we differentiate into our connective tissue proper, you know, those loose versus dense connective fibers. Supporting connective tissue is the cartilage and the bone, and then fluid connective tissue is blood and the lymph. Like I said, we'll hit this a little bit more later. This right here, this is perfect for throwing together some kind of little Quizlet or something. Just understand, we're going to go through all of this terminology, but understanding what we really want to know. We want to know the breakdown of each of these, okay? So we want to know, what are the connective tissue proper? Loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue. There's those two. And then in the loose connective tissue, we have areolar, adipose, and reticular. In the dense, we have regular, irregular, and elastic. The supporting, we have cartilage and bone. We have hyaline, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Bone, we have compact bone, or we have spongy bone. And then fluid connective tissue, we have blood and we have lymph. So this gives us a lot of our basics as far as answering questions goes, okay? Then we'll look and understand what each of those chunks are. Here we go. Here's just a little graph just showing couple of these different types of tissues. Again, a little bit of background info. We're going to get deeper into this later on. There's two different types of cells within connective tissue. Okay, we have them sorted into categories called fixed cells and free cells. I'm just going to add that. Fixed cells and then free cells. Just as their names say, fixed cells are fixed in the tissue. They stay within the tissue to carry out the specific functions. Free cells, they're produced there and they stay there. So they're produced locally. That's the big point. They stay in the tissue. They're fixed. The free cells are produced in other locations, usually bone marrow, and then they migrate or they travel into the connective tissue in order to carry out their specific functions. So we'll look at a couple of different types of those in the future cells. And then also we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about, again, that extracellular matrix, the fibers, the ground substance, all that kind of stuff, because part of those are key components in identifying or differentiating between the different types of connective tissue. So again, all of this, that ground substance, extracellular matrix, those protein fibers, the elastic, collagen, reticular fibers, all of that stuff, we covered in that previous lecture. So if you haven't watched that one yet, I would jump back right now. Watch that one first where we go through all of these different parts and components, and then come back to this, okay? We also have then some of these resident cells, aka fixed cells. Resident is another way of saying fixed cells. So those that are produced locally and they stay in the tissue. Mesenchymal cells, macrophages, adipocyte, fibroblasts. Again, we'll kind of look at each of these later on as well. Okay, so this is the big graph that gives us a bunch of information, but we're going to take this and we're going to break all of this down as we go through, okay? And these are the main ones that we are going to focus on. We should also actually have this under the specialized. We also do have the adipose, the cartilage, the bone, the blood, which we'll get into briefly. But the ones we're going to look at connective tissue proper, the loose areolar connective tissue, dense irregular, dense regular, and dense elastic. The embryonic connective tissues, we'll look at mesenchyme tissue and mucoid or mucus connective tissue. Mucoid is the more common way of saying it. For the specialized connective tissue, we'll look at reticular tissue, connective tissue, and we'll also look at some of those other ones, like the the specific cells, the adipose tissue, all that kind of stuff. Let me add these in here. Adipose tissue, adipose, bone and blood. Oops. There we go. Okay, starting with the loose tissue. This is the loose areolar connective tissue. This is the main one that we really talk about. We don't... Yeah. When you talk about loose connective tissue, you primarily are talking about the areolar tissue. Areolar is going to be on a test question. So on a test question about loose connective tissue, this is going to be our number one, or should I say areolar is going to be our number one answer. Otherwise, look for the adipose, or what was the other one that they had? Or reticular. guys get the live editing process. Okay. So this is what it looks like cellularly, histologically. Biggest thing to understand, it is loose. So there's not a lot of space there is a lot of space in between everything. There's not a lot really compacted down into here. So loose connective tissue is loose. And if we think about the next one, we're going to talk about dense tissue is going to be dense. So lots going on, really compact. So we have a high concentration of cells with relatively few fibers. The loose areolar connective tissue is one of the most abundant connective tissues that we have in our bodies. There's tons of it. Okay, it's highly vascularized, and that's because it's used as a medium for nutrient and waste exchange. So we're exchanging nutrients and waste in between all the tissues. So think about from the blood. Blood carries a lot of our oxygen, it carries our nutrients, it carries waste as well away from the tissues, which you'll be learning about in Physiology 1 next trimester a little bit more. And you think about how does it get into the actual cells, right? So it has to go from the blood vessels themselves through that epithelial tissue of the blood cells into this connective tissue, and then from the connective tissue it exchanges it with the cell. Again, depending on what type of cell and the location of the cell, you get into more of the specifics of it. But understand that this is why, that connective tissue, it's loose so that it has a way to exchange the nutrients and the waste. It's also known as a packing tissue to protect our tissues. You can see any connective tissue cell type in it. Most abundant are fibroblasts and macrophages. So these are the most common ones you'll see, but you can see any of the different types of connective tissue cells. It is flexible, not stress resistant. Stress resistant means like if you're applying a force into it. So flexible means that you can move and it bends and it is good bending, but stressing, you put a lot of force into it, it doesn't do so great. And it is most frequently found adjacent to epithelial tissues. I'm going to go ahead, I will record the epithelial tissue and post that, and as well in the lineup, the epithelial video should be before this one. When I took the course, they were in a slightly different order, which is why the recording order is a little bit out of whack, but I'm adjusting that as we go. Another thing to understand with the loose areolar connective tissue is you have a lot of ground substance and several different cell types. These slides that are here, the definition, function, location, these are kind of extra slides that I put in here just to give you kind of the super quick breakdown of things. Main things you'll want to, pretty much this slide has most of the information that you need, all kind of in one place. But focus, go through each of the slides so that you can see all the information, okay? Location is a really big one. We always want to focus on location, where we find these things. So for the loose connective tissue, it's under the skin in the subcutaneous layer, around the blood vessels, around nerves, in the mucous membranes of the digestive and respiratory tracts. If you stop and you think and you look at that, under the skin, the blood vessels, the mucous membranes, digestive and respiratory systems, all of those places, what do all of those have in common? It's that they have the epithelial tissue close by to them. Okay, a lot of them have a lot of vessels, so the digestive and the respiratory tract have lots of blood vessels running through them. So anywhere where you see a lot of epithelial tissue, that's where you're also going to see a lot of this type of connective tissue. Now, when we talk about dense connective tissue, just like the name says, it is dense. There's a whole bunch of stuff tightly compacted into here. Add in the second part, irregular versus regular. You can kind of look in here. This is super dense. There's not a lot of space in between everything. but it looks really unorganized and random. It's really irregular. The regular tissue right here, you almost see like these little wave patterns. It's neat, it's organized, it's all right there. We also have another tissue called dense elastic connective tissue, and this one right here, it looks more similar to the regular, just a little bit thinner pieces, okay? This actually right here, the dense elastic tissue, this is part of a vessel right here. The tunica media, tunica adventitia, and the internal elastic lamina, all of this right here. In general, the dense connective tissue is dense, relatively few cells, but with an abundance of fibers, of connective tissue fibers. We have lots and lots of fibroblasts. Remember, fibro equals it's cartilage. Nope, collagen. Collagen blast equals builder. So these are our builder cells of I want to make sure that I write that right. Instead of just calling, because it's more broad than that. We usually associate it with the types of collagen, but fibro is literally fiber or fibrous tissue. That's better. Which includes, our collagen or all of our different types of some of our different types of connective tissues. Okay. So we have bundles of collagen fibers are arranged irregularly. This is for specifically the irregular connective tissue. It's less flexible, but more stress resistant. Found in the dermis of skin, organ capsules, periosteum, perichondrium. A lot of big words there, right there. Remember periosteum. Peri meaning outside, os meaning bone, so it's in the outer layer of the bone. Perichondrium, chondri right there is cartilage. Peri on the outside of cartilage. This is where, if you learn your prefix and your suffixes, the beginning and end parts of words, you can break down words. I talk about this a lot in biochemistry, where if you can break down the words and understand the components, understanding new words becomes much, much easier. Dense connective tissue with a disorganized or irregular arrangement of collagen fibers, allowing it to withstand tension in multiple directions. This is my extra piece right here. Those location, dermis, fibrous capsules, kidneys, and bones around the joints. And again, that was our dense irregular. Our dense regular connective tissue, again, is fibroblasts and lots of type 1 collagen. You have bundles of the collagen fibers are arranged in parallel. That's why it's regular. High tensile strength, but only specifically in one direction. Meaning it handles force or movement in one direction really, really well. Usually like along the direction that the fibers are put together. So it's like if you have those fibers interlocked, connected like this, you pull this way, away from each other, it holds really, really well. But if you start to try and bend this way, it doesn't do so great. So the regular connective tissue is good in one specific direction. And these are our tendons and our ligaments, which this makes sense. If you move a specific way, like any direction with a very, very high force, high velocity, and your tendon or your ligaments are not prepared for that movement, or if you move it a way that it's not supposed to, or move it too far, that's when you get damage to the tendons and to the ligaments. My dad just actually tore his Achilles tendon, and the way that he tore it was that they were playing pickleball, and he sidestepped. So you think about the Achilles tendon, amazingly strong tendon, and if you dissected it in your anatomy lab, you can actually look at it and see. Actually, I should say next trimester you guys will dissect it in anatomy lab. It might be in gross 2 actually. One usually gross 1 is a lot more focused on the kind of upper extremity, chest and back. Gross 2 gets more into lower extremity stuff and internal cavities. But anyways, when you do get to that point, or if you want to look up cadaver images of tendons, you'll see that the fibers, you can actually look and see the little fibers, and they all run one specific direction, kind of towards the muscle, right? Towards the muscle to the bone. So my dad, when he was playing pickleball, he was kind of shuffle stepping, went a little too far and just snapped the tendon. Again, because high tensile strength in the one direction where the gastroc and the soleus are really pulling on that tendon, it handles that force great. But when you add in an unprepared tendon with kind of that side motion, not so great. Now, dense elastic connective tissue. These are found in a couple of very specific tissues. The ones I want you to really, really remember are the ligamentum nuchae and then the ligamentum flavum, as well as walls of the elastic arteries, specifically arteries. Remember, arteries, the big arteries have that elastic portion that helps them snap back closed. Okay. Yeah, not much else about this. Mainly just understand the location and that this exists. Embryonic. So we have two different types. We have mesenchyme, also known as embryonic connective tissue, and mucoid or mucus connective tissue. Again, there's not a ton to really understand here. Mostly it's just kind of definitions and word recognition. So mucoid, or the mucus connective tissue, is mostly what's called extra embryonic. Anytime that you see the prefix extra equals outside of. Embryonic, meaning the embryo, so it's outside of the embryo, so it's not located within the embryo. So it's developed from the zygote, which is that original ball of cells that starts to grow as soon as cell division, everything begins, and it starts the fetus begins to implant. But it's not actually part of the embryo itself. It's part of the umbilical cord. It's also known as called Wharton's jelly. 1,000,000% that terminology is going to be on the exam. You're going to see Wharton's jelly on the exam. It's on every single exam when you start talking about this stuff. It's on every single exam. It always is. Another couple of key points. The extracellular matrix is rich in hyaluronic acid. That's another one of those little tidbits. Sometimes it gets asked, sometimes it doesn't. It's whatever. As well as fibroblasts and type 1 collagen. If you see a pattern here, pretty much all these, type 1 collagen, fibroblasts, type 1 collagen, fibroblasts, and type 1 collagen. See, so all of these tissues have fibroblasts and type 1 collagen going inside of them. Here again, just the definition, function, location. Don't worry too much about the function. Just understand, you need to know it's in the umbilical cord. It's called Wharton's jelly. It's known to have hyaluronic acid in the extracellular matrix. There we go. They have the umbilical arteries, the vein. All this stuff in between there is the Wharton's jelly, aka mucoid. And this is what it looks like. You will 100% have this as well on your lab exam. They love to put this almost this exact picture. It's probably going to be this picture. Look very, very similar to this picture. And be like, hey, what's this? Now, besides the mucoid, we also have what's called mesenchyme or embryonic connective tissue. If we remember way back to our little chart, that common origin of mesenchyme was right there at the very, very beginning. So mesenchyme, you can kind of say, is going to be the mother of all of our connective tissue. So the mesenchyme is found in the specific layer of the early embryo known as the mesodermal layer of the early embryo. I believe I put in here I think it's in a different, it might be in the epithelial. I do go over a little bit of embryology in one of these lectures. I believe it's in the epithelial lecture, which I'll have recorded and posted soon. Anyway, so the mesenchyme is found in the mesodermal layer of the early embryo, and it's the embryonic precursor of connective tissues. It is something called pluripotent cells. Pluri meaning plural, potent meaning potential. Okay, this is 100% a test question. They always ask about which of the following is a pluripotent cell, and it's the mesenchymal cells. We can actually look and see. So this is what it's referring to. It's a mesenchymal stromal cell, or they sometimes call them stem cells. What it means is that this cell is pluripotent. It has the potential to become any of these cells, okay? It can go through osteogenesis, osteo being bone, genesis being creation. It can turn into an osteoblast, then become an osteocyte. It can go through chondrogenesis, cartilage creation, myogenesis, muscle generation, fibrogenesis, becoming a fibroblast, adipogenesis, fat creation, it becomes an adipocyte. So you want to recognize these names, and recognize again the prefix, the suffix, the osteo, chondro, myo, fibro, adipo, all of those meaning the bone, cartilage, muscle, synovium, skin, fibers, adipose tissue, fat tissue. Again, just definition, function, location. The mesenchymal cells, it differentiates it into all the different cells. Remember that mesodermal layer. Within the mesenchymal cell, we have their mesenchymal cells are fixed, produce likely remaining tissue, carry their function. Embryonic mesenchyme, they're pluripotent, cytoplasmic. They have what are called cytoplasmic extensions, which I have definition right down there at the bottom. No fibers are produced, and it responds to signals from surrounding matrix and cells to commit to a specific fate. What this is saying is that the embryo gives off specific commands / chemicals at different stages in different locations to guide which cells need to differentiate and when. Differentiate means to change, to become different. And so this is one of the things, it's not super well understood exactly how all of this happens, within the development of the embryo, but it's really cool. So the body, or the embryo, knows, the fetus knows kind of when to give off all these different signals, and the cells then combine and condense and go to the specific locations and form the specific things that they need to form when they're supposed to form it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause this video recording here. This is going to be our part 1, and we'll continue second part going over some of those fixed cells.